Welcome to another episode of Grace Under Pressure, where my guest is Carol Kauffman. I will tell you about Carol in a moment, but those of you who have watched the show know that Grace Under Pressure poses questions to thought leaders and doers like Carol, who are making our world better. Grace Under Pressure reveals what's too often dismissed as the soft stuff, the connecting, the caring, the commitment we feel toward one another. And grace for me is the generosity we show, the respect we give, and the compassion we demonstrate. And when we do it as a leader, especially during challenging times, it requires that ability to act for others and energize everyone around us. So welcome, Carol. It's a pleasure to have you on today. I want to tell the folks about you because I have wanted to have you as a guest ever since I put this show together, because you are someone I respect greatly because you have changed our coaching world for the better. And so let's talk. You are global. Marshall Goldsmith called you the #1 leadership coach in the world, and Thinkers 50 shortlisted you as a top coach. You're on faculty at Harvard, and you're the founder of the Institute of Coaching. And you have developed the coaching approach to training, which is great. Your client list is an A list, beginning with A clients like AstraZeneca and closing with Vertex and a whole lot of other companies in between. And so you are also the founder of IOC, and you will tell us a little bit about that maybe later. And Carol, it's welcome to the show. And what I like talking about you talking with you, I always come away and go, I am smarter for having spent 15 minutes with Carol. You educate me and open up doors. So welcome.
Thank you. I have to say the same back. When we had our first conversation, I immediately went to Marshall later and went, John is like wicked smart. He pulls on all kinds of things you don't expect. So back at you, babe.
Oh, wow. You make my day. Thank you. Carol, people are under a lot of pressure today. And so what are you hearing from folks? What are you hearing from leaders?
A lot. Basically, at this point, there's this intersectionality. Okay, so there's COVID, then there is Black Lives Matter, and then there is, financial pressures. Then there is the politics. And so everything just feels like it's intersecting at the same nexus point for everyone. So the biggest thing is how to manage the pressure, how to manage their fear, how to manage their anger, and how to manage their people to create environments that can thrive despite the incredible difficulty people are having.
So what kind of advice do you give them about managing these uncertain times?
What's interesting. So I hope your readers will join me on LinkedIn or carolkauffman2fs.com. But I did a post, and all my posts are actually, I'd love for you to look at sometime. My posts are all in my website under snippets or something. So I had this post of a tree suspended in the air that my son took. And I decided to do a post on how can you feel grounded when there is no ground. So how do we do that? So what do we ground in if we don't have earth underneath it? So first is we have to really manage ourselves. So if you can't be grounded, how can you be stable? How can you be centered? How can you be aware of what tilts you off kilter? So for example, if your sense of groundedness and certainty comes from achievements, you have to really think about achievements in a very different way. I was talking to a leader, and great guy, and he was saying, I just came out 700 million ahead. My engagement scores are 92. I still feel at 6s and 7s. And partly it's because when you have a great achievement and we're all in the same place, there's kinds of lots of ways you just everyone's sort of it may not be high-fiving, but you get it in the air. And so now we've got to get it in ourselves in a way we've never had to before. So I think we all have to, at the end of every day, remind ourselves, what did we do well that day? What gave us meaning that day? And to kind of center in that. And then the other thing is to know for yourself, what keeps your boat steady? So is it routine? Is it more conversations? Is it self-care? For me, it's meditating, but it's doing little meditations during the day that helps. And also being more organized, which is what makes me the most stressed. So everybody needs to find what stresses them and how can they up their self-care.
Great. You have a brand new article. It just came down, Harvard Business Review. So it's called The Problem of Resilience, which is a title that grabbed me because resilience is something I've always viewed as a positive.
Yes, yes. And HBR changed the title at the last minute, which I really liked, which is without compassion, resilient leaders can fall short. And that is the problem with resilience. The whole issue is it's extremely polarizing times right now. And times like this bring out the best in us and it brings out the worst in us, and at different times during the day. So, basically, resilience is that capacity to bounce back, and it's a little bit of grit, it's a little bit of mental toughness. But when we are not aware of how our resilience can blind us to other people's suffering, then you can get in trouble. And as I shared with you, a couple of stories, but one of them being one of my leaders, a guy in Europe, who was one of the nicest leaders I know, suddenly went on a rant about someone. And I was like, it was like the world kind of suddenly tilted. I'm like, what is going on? This guy is like Mr. Softy. And then I'm realizing he's just not getting that he has this backbone of steel and other people don't. And he's actually judging them because they're not like him. And that's when as I'm thinking, why is he like this? Why is he like this? Then it sort of hit me where I said, do you remember what you used to do for fun when you were in your 20s? And he's like, and finally I go, do you remember, like, he was a military pilot and he did like crazy things with helicopters. And I said, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, yeah, I used to weave them through the trees for fun. So I'm like, do you think maybe you kept inoculating yourself from fear? And as a result, you run in when other people are afraid. And it's not them that's the problem. It's that you're not the normal one and you don't get that you have this backbone of steel. And therefore, other people fall short. So in a way, he wasn't appreciating his own strengths. And this made him vulnerable to not really appreciating that other people can be frightened, but are not like less than you are.
Great. In the article, you talk about something called a contempt attack. What's that?
Okay, so I think we probably all heard of panic attacks. So all of a sudden your heart speeds up and you're like, you're just terribly afraid. And that is because your amygdala is hijacked in the place of fear. Well, in contempt attacks, it's your amygdala is hijacked, but it's in a kind of fight mode, but it's in a particular fight mode where what you're feeling is, so first of all, you feel like it feels terrible. Having a contempt attack is not fun. And it's just you're feeling dysphoric. Usually you're feeling some kind of stress, and then it zooms in on one person, and if only they, right? And so what happens is you get negative on people, and okay, you can be judgmental, but then it goes into they're less than me. And then when it's dangerous, it goes into they're not worth it. Like, what is wrong with them? And then you have the, really, Joe? Are you kidding? As opposed to, wait a minute, what's going on for Joe? And, and then when you feel yourself clicking into that space, because good people do it. It's not that bad people have contempt. It's good people. Very similar to the whole enlightenment now about racism, is that nice people, as it were, good people, can not know that they're racist. And in this case, good people cannot realize they're slipping into disdain or contempt for other people. And it's very powerful.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing. So, contempt attack, what can we do about it? How do we defend ourselves, or how do we prevent this?
Well, prevention is great. That would be the number one thing. I'm not sure the answer to that, except really staying on top of who you are as much of the time as possible. sort of that, who do I want to be right now? And keeping to ask yourself that question. So if it has hit you, I think the first thing to do is perspective taking. Walk over the bridge to where they are. Look at the landscape from where they are. What is going on in their lives? So if someone really looks like they are kind of collapsing, well, maybe there's a reason. Maybe you haven't supported them enough. So if this person isn't doing well, maybe I, as the leader, need to look in the mirror and not just out the window. And then one thing, there's a bunch of studies on this. The ones I know about are from Sonia Lubomirsky in positive psychology. And it has an unfortunate name. I don't like the name. It's called Letting Go of Grudges. But this, how do you let go of contempt? So first of all, imagine a piece of paper. And here's the person. You draw a circle, and this is the person that you're feeling contemptuous of or disdainful. That Joe, he never gets anything done on time. Okay, so in the circle, Joe never does anything on time, and you do not talk yourself out of it. Okay, this is not cognitive behavior therapy where you then address that. That's a whole nother set of things to do. But now draw like 5 or 6 or 7 other circles and make yourself think through, what has Joe done that I respect? What has Joe done for other people? What are good things Joe has done for me in the past? And then it's like almost then can detox your system as you remember who Joe is, not who Joe is to you in that moment when you're under too much stress and it's coming out sideways.
It's a degree of showing empathy, is it not? So,
yeah, and it's interesting. What is empathy? Empathy is not a fuzzy feeling. Empathy is the capacity to cross that bridge, to know somebody else's story, and you don't have to agree with them, but you have to have a capacity to appreciate their story with some kindness. And to be empathic, having empathy is appreciating the other person's point of view and treating it respectfully. Does not mean you agree with it, doesn't mean you're having all kinds of wonderful feelings. It's just sort of getting their reality and being respectful of it.
Great. As we think from a leadership perspective and where we are right now, what 3 things, maybe 2, 3 things we can do to have a positive impact?
Okay. Well, my favorite question, and Marshall's going to write an article about this, so I'm very excited, and then he wants me to write one, is the question I ask myself. I'm probably now down to 20 times a day, but it's literally in any interaction, who do I want to be right now? And then an hour later, who do I want to be right now? So today, for example, how did it start out? I was on a call with the CEO, and I was really wanting to help her. And then I started noticing I was doing one of the Marshall derailers of adding too much value. So it's like, who do I want to be right now? Do I want to be that person piling on information, or do I want to downshift and help her think, give her space to think, have input? But okay, so that was who do I want to be right then. Next hour, I'm leading a global workshop, and we sort of goofed on this one, and not that many people showed up. And then they started talking, and then I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to do this for 2 hours. They are so boring. And then I'm like, who do I want to be right now? Do I want to be that cranky person who feels these people didn't get their organization together and I'm sitting here? Wait a minute. I want to be the person who can really be engaged. And it doesn't matter who's here or who's not here. And maybe it's my job to help this group feel excited, alive, and help them be interesting. So I just do that one question over and over and over and over.
Right. But who do I want to be at this moment? And that's very powerful advice, because it involves both introspection and action, and which is what leaders need to do. So that's a cool thought. So sometimes coaches coaches have to use tough talk. And I know you are an exemplar of that, because that's why you're so effective at what you do. You want to share a story about that?
If you have 25 hours. I have like so many stories, but let me put tough talk in context. One of the big rules, if you're going to have a tough talk with somebody, so of course there's again the empathy thing, where you have to be able to walk over to the bridge to this person who is engaging in what might be toxic or tough behaviors that are not okay or are really getting in the way and blunting their impact. So the first rule of tough talk is you can only confront someone 80% of how much you care about them. So, in football, European football, or soccer, there's something called an offsides foul, and basically it means, so you'll be able to tell me if I get this wrong, but I think it's something more like the offense, you cannot get ahead of the ball, and if you
Correct.
do, it's foul. So I consider that if your confrontation is you're ahead of the ball, it's foul. You stop. You're not you can't really confront. But if you think of a confrontation as a goal, as a score, as you're moving towards it, the caring must be greater than any confrontation. And if you don't have that caring, you're not allowed to confront. So that's the standard I hold myself to, because otherwise the danger is shame. I mean, that's the whole thing of contempt, is you make this other person feel ashamed. And that's like so toxic. So number one, before I'm tough, I'm soft. Before I'm tough, I really have to care about the person. So I'll actually use that as an example. This is one of my favorite examples. I love this guy. So one of my leaders, rolling eyes, get it? One of my leaders, like, oh my God. Rolling your eyes isn't always disdain, by the way. But he was carrying on. He was the head of a very large organization. And he was carrying on, it was a medical organization. And he was carrying on about certain of the faculty. It was this one group of about 100 or 200 faculty. And he was under a lot of pressure for the academic credentialing, for them writing papers and doing this and doing that, and they weren't. And he was like on a tear. He was going like, I just can't believe it. Like, these people, they're calling themselves the politics. It's all they care about is their money and their own profession and their own advancement, and not this and not that. And, they're calling themselves things like, well, I'm the director of linens and closets, and I'm the director of brooms. And, I'm just going to tell them what they need to hear about. And I'm thinking, so he's on this tear. And I said, no, you're not. He goes, no, I'm going to tell them blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, you're not. And he's like, why? And I said, because you don't deserve to tell them anything. Well, that kind of stopped him in his tracks. And he's like, what do you mean? And I go, directors of linens and closets, head of brooms and mops. Are these not people who are saving lives every day? Are these not the people that have created your organization one of the best reputations in the world? And this is what you're calling them? I said, you don't know their lives. You haven't crossed over the bridge. You don't know what's going on for them. When you do, then that's okay. But before then, you don't deserve to. And just as I saw, these people, he's like, he's about to explode, because like nobody talks to him like this. And just when I was like, I could see, I said, and you know what, hun? You just got to take off them cranky pants. And he did that. He cracked up laughing. And then we started thinking about what is their experience, et cetera, et cetera. Lovely end to the story, which is about 2 months later, we're talking, and he goes, oh, Carol, got some good news. I go, like, what's that? He goes, I got my jolly pants on now. and he came up with this incredible innovation to support these faculty members and these, the surgeons and everyone. And it was remarkable. But in his case, it was the same as my case, right? That it's not okay to confront if you haven't been in the other person's shoes and if you don't care about them. Otherwise, you're just going to possibly be mean. And that's not okay.
No, and that's such a powerful lesson because, again, it's, as we had talked earlier, we, as a leader, can sometimes be wrapped up in our own world, and we, rather than think broadly, we think, "Oh, this is happening to me," and so
Mhm.
that's why I think executive coaching can play such a valuable role, because we're disinterested in them, and we can be, as Marshall always talks, sometimes we're the only one that gives them straight talk. Is that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially with my group. I have a accidental specialty, not all of them, but I'd say 50% of maybe 60% of the CEOs I work with have reputations of being high determination, high action, and bulls in china shops. And they do not understand their impact. And so what happens, it's really actually distressing to me, because they are really good humans and people don't know it, because what happens to them is that they're under pressure 6 ways to Sunday, and it comes out as drive, drive, drive. And so if they can learn basically emotion regulation and also really getting their impact and what that's like, it can change how everyone experiences them. So I'll add one image for you. I used to kid that I learned everything I needed to know about leadership when I was 7. And a girlfriend of mine told me a joke, which is, a 1,000-pound gorilla walks into a crowded bar. Where does it sit? So where does it sit?
Anywhere it wants.
Exactly, anywhere it wants. And then the follow-up is if you have impact over someone's resources, salary, projects, you are the gorilla. And the issue is you are never not the gorilla. And so if you say that's a dumb idea, you can crush someone. So I was on a call once with this guy, Ajay, who's the CEO of MasterCard. And he was saying it's the amplifying effect. So if the more and more people see you as power, the smallest thing you say can have this gigantic impact on the other person. And so as leaders, we really need to be so self-aware, because we have a bigger impact for negativity and we have a bigger impact for good. A kind word from a powerful leader can be like what you do, that can really give someone a moment of grace. So how can you as a leader be offering moments of grace to people by the way you're talking with them, by the way you're saying, hey, that was really great, that really helped, or what you're doing has a lot of meaning to this organization. So how can we as leaders really see ourselves as almost conduits of grace for people? So you're going to be a conduit of grace or a conduit of aggression, pick.
And that's great. And it's the perfect lead in, because I like to ask all of our guests if they have a moment of grace or an example of grace they would like to share. And do you have one, Carol? So.
I have 2. So one is a very poignant story. When I was a little girl and, young teenager, and my parents were getting divorced and all kinds of bad things were happening, and I was feeling very alone and dejected one day. And I remember I was doing an errand for my mother and feeling, I don't even remember why, but just feeling oppressed and lonely and terrible, the way that, in a way, almost only a 14-year-old can do. And I'm online at the post office, and this woman was there with a dog. And when I showed up, this dog just leapt up and was like so happy to see me. It completely lifted my spirits, and I felt cared and important and whatever. So I got tremendous grace from a dog.
That's a great story. Especially now when we're talking about people living at home or be more confined at home than usual, and they're buying the COVID pet or the COVID dog. It's a great story.
Yeah. And then the grown-up one is the really shocking experience I had in 2009 when Ruth Ann Harnish contacted me and challenged me. Basically, she said, Carol, you need to be the face of coaching. And why aren't you? And actually, this little bit happened in 2003 when I said, because I've been a coach 4 months. She
Yeah.
said that's irrelevant. She then proceeded to give me media coaching for a while, and then a bunch of other things, and then eventually gave me $2 million to start the Institute of Coaching. And that was sort of grace and pressure, not just grace under pressure.
Well, that's the nature of grace, because it is given to us freely, and it's up to us to put it into action. Carol, you've been a terrific guest today. It's such a pleasure to talk to you. How can we find you?
Best way to find me is Carol Kauffman, KAU2FsMAN.com. And that's my website. I'm trying to make it an educational website. It's really not a self-promotional one. So I've got, because
I love your website. It's terrific. It's just wonderful.
Thank you. And it's really, since my practice is usually full, it's not a hire me website. It's a here's what I'm thinking. I hope this is helpful kind of website. And but I'm really interested in people signing up for my emailing list. Great. So if you're out there and you like this, sign up for my email list, please.
And we will put that link into the notes for this. Carol, you've been a terrific guest, and I say thank you.
You're welcome, my dear.